The sun shines brightly over a vast mountain range home to lush green forests and winding paths, and a young man dashes across a wooden bridge, heading towards a traditional sect building nestled in the trees. This is Baekun-ho, a third-generation disciple of the renowned Manhwa sect, one of the 9 ancient sects. He arrives at a training hall, pushing the door open and noting that, as expected, no one is around. He knows he is weaker than the others, so he feels he must absorb Manhwa's pure energy to keep up. As he sits down to meditate, another disciple watches him from behind, thinking the kid is always muttering to himself. Eunho opens his eyes and greets the figure, recognizing him as his fellow disciple, Jang Kwang. 2 other disciples arrive. Kwang immediately mocks Eunho, questioning why a talentless guy like him even studies martial arts. However, the silver-haired youth Lee Junhaing tells Kwang not to be so harsh since Eunho saved their training spots. Junhaing then encourages Eunho, offering to arrange a job at his family's security transport company. Kwang scoffs at the offer, saying a loser like Eunho could never handle such a job due to his lack of talent and skill. Eunho thinks that although Jang Kwang is the one openly tormenting him, the real bully is someone else. He knows Lee Junhaing only pretends to be nice to boost his reputation, while secretly manipulating Kwang to make his life miserable. Junhaing is the son of a top family in the sect. His uncle is an elder, and he has consumed special elixirs since childhood. With a special constitution, he is the complete opposite of Eunho, who can only thank him for the seemingly kind offer. Junhaing pats him on the shoulder, saying he's counting on him since his favorite food is for breakfast. Eunho nervously agrees. At that moment, Jang Kwang interrupts, reminding Eunho that it is his turn to clean the kitchen tonight. Ho is taken aback and tries to explain that Junhaing already tasked him with cleaning the shrine. Kwang grabs him aggressively, annoyed, and tells him to just clean both the kitchen and the shrine, saying he lacks foresight. He then squeezes the boy's face, demanding he start thinking and do better. Eunho nervously apologizes for his mistake, and Jang Kwang's grip tightens around the young disciple's face, a silent display of dominance. Forcing a smile, Eunho promises to be more careful next time, trying to de-escalate the situation. As the sun sets, the sky over the mountains glows with a deep pink hue, signaling the end of the day. So night falls over the Manhwa sect, and the training hall stands silently under the light of a full moon. And so much later, Eunho finally finishes cleaning the kitchen, realizing it's already late and he'll get little sleep. While wiping down a pillar, he wonders aloud if his diligent work might earn him some kind of blessing. His eyes land on a brightly shining shrine dedicated to monk Gongyang So, a revered figure in the sect. The monk was the very essence of Manhwa, a man who rose from a troubled youth to achieve greatness. And so to someone like Ho, who feels weak and talentless, the monk's story is nothing less than a beacon of hope. He quietly wishes that he too will one day become as great as the legendary figure he admires. With renewed determination, he continues to clean the shrine, polishing the wood with care. Suddenly the scene changes, and he finds himself practicing his sword forms under a moonlit sky filled with falling petals. And he looks on with a shocked expression, watching the fluid and powerful movements being performed. He wonders who this person could be, swinging a sword with such incredible skill. A mysterious figure with sharp eyes appears, echoing the question back at him. The man reveals himself as the Supreme Master, Mong Won-kung, claiming to be the world's greatest. Ho is stunned, recognizing the name as the legendary, unparalleled Monk Won-kung. He quickly concludes that this must be a dream. The master confirms it, calling it a Mong Won vision. Eunho is confused by this term, but the master simply tells him to pick up his sword. The young disciple stares back in shock, unsure of what is happening or what he should do. In the dream, the master lunges forward with a glowing sword, his eyes red with intensity as Eunho watches in alarm. The young disciple quickly moves his feet, preparing to defend himself against the sudden onslaught. He grips his own sword, his expression filled with determination as he prepares for the master's lesson. And so the Supreme Master smirks, asking if this isn't the very blessing that the young disciple had been wishing for. And so he then leaps into the air, telling Eunho that this is a rare chance and that they should not waste it. The scene shifts, and Eunho wakes up abruptly in his bed, looking completely dazed and exhausted from the intense dream. Sitting up, he realizes with a sigh that he is now even training in his sleep, the memory of the dream still vivid. He looks at his hand, still feeling the phantom weight of the sword, wishing he had dreamed of his hero instead. Shaking off his fatigue, he grabs his wooden sword and rushes out, knowing it's the day Master Gongya Chan teaches. The training grounds are already full, with rows of disciples practicing their forms in unison, their shouts filling the air. Eunho arrives, slightly out of breath but ready to join the day's training session with his fellow candidates. He notices Lee Junhaing nearby, who kindly asks another disciple if he is having any trouble with his training. The instructor for the day is Master Gongya Chan. Eunho reflects that they are not full disciples yet but merely candidates, and these candidates undergo basic training and hope to be selected by an elite to become official third-generation disciples. The master, Gongya Chan, arrives and warmly greets a disciple, showing concern about his well-being. Ho watches him, thinking he chose this master because he appears more lenient than the others. Suddenly, the master's friendly demeanor vanishes as he calls out a heavier, set disciple in the third row. He furiously scolds the student for chatting during class and orders him to go clean the male toilets immediately. Ho realizes the master is only lenient to those he deems deserving, which is why he is not popular with everyone. And seeing this, the young man tightens his grip on his sword, believing this strictness is a chance for him to stand out. He can't help but feel a flicker of hope, thinking it is a good sign that the master remembered his name. But suddenly, the master grabs his shoulder and angrily asks who taught him to swing a sword in such a manner. And the young disciple freezes, his eyes wide with shock and confusion at the instructor's sudden change in mood. He immediately thinks he is doomed, as his movements are a direct result of the intense training from his dream. And so even though he has always been seen as someone lacking talent, he has always followed instructions to the letter. The master watches him for a moment before Ho can even respond, his expression unreadable. To his surprise, the instructor compliments him, stating that his swordsmanship has shown noticeable improvement. And so leaning closer, the master then offers him some quiet advice on how to use his sword to make up for his lack of strength. Ho is left stunned, feeling as if the entire atmosphere around them shifted for a brief moment. The master then turns his attention to Lee Junhyung, praising him as a prodigy and telling the other students to learn from him. Watching this, Ho begins to wonder if he just imagined the praise he thought he had received. Lee Junhyung then executes a powerful sword swing, creating a visible arc of purple energy in the air. Ho is amazed by the sheer power, thinking his own sword would shatter if it ever clashed with such a strike. His gaze then shifts to another figure, a young woman whose sword movements are just as swift and impressive. He recognizes the girl as she practices, her form surrounded by a flurry of pink energy and petals. She is Kang Ian, one of the most qualified disciples, whose raw skill is said to be on par with Junhyung's. In a recent duel, she displayed remarkable skills against him, only losing because she ran out of stamina. He believes that if anyone has a chance of becoming a master before Junhyung, it would be her. And compared to prodigies like them, Ho feels utterly insignificant, a mere shadow in their bright light. He grips his wooden sword tightly, questioning if he could ever become as great as the venerable masters of legend. Driven by a newfound resolve, he puts all his energy into his sword practice, shouting with determination. But in his mind, he is once again in that dreamscape, where the Supreme Master tells him his goal is impossible. The young disciple is taken aback by the blunt statement, his mind reeling in confusion. The master appears before him, explaining it is impossible for him to become like his hero, Gong Yang So. The legendary figure wonders who this Baekun, who he has been hearing about, is, finding himself once again in the boy's dream. Ho finally understands that this is not just a dream but a form of enlightenment, a special vision. The master smirks, noting that the boy is not a complete idiot, and asks if his lesson from the previous night was helpful. The disciple remembers the praise he received from his instructor, the connection between the dream and reality clicking into place. He thanks the master profusely, explaining that the lesson helped him catch Master Gongya Chan's attention. The master is pleased and tells him to draw his sword, promising they will train every night until his potential fully blooms. With renewed vigor, the young disciple draws his blade, ready to face the intense training ahead. The master's eyes glow with power, watching every move the young man makes with sharp focus. Hanu moves swiftly, his sword a blur of motion as he practices the forms the master taught him, and the Supreme Master watches him for a moment, then gives a simple nod of approval, saying it is not bad. He then challenges the boy to try and stop his next attack, his expression turning into a menacing grin. The disciple braces himself, his eyes wide as he prepares to block the incoming strike. The master unleashes a powerful attack, surrounding himself in a vortex of swirling blue energy. Ho meets the assault head-on, his blade clashing with the master's in a brilliant burst of light and power. He realizes this is more than just training, it is a series of questions posed by the master's sword. He understands he must answer each question with his blade, again and again, as this is his path to true strength. In a brilliant explosion of light, the young disciple realizes that this intense training is actually fun. He questions this feeling, surprised that he, of all people, could be enjoying martial arts, and until now he had never found any joy in his training, viewing it solely as a grim means of survival. He remembers his past struggles, swinging his sword with desperation just to keep up with the others, and so even though his life felt mundane, he practiced martial arts simply because he had to in order to live. But for the first time since he was born, this intense exchange feels less like a burden and more like an exciting game. Their swords continue to clash in a dazzling display of sparks, each strike a new question and answer. Dozens of these exchanges accumulate, and within the chaotic dance of blades, only one clear path becomes visible to him. He looks forward with determination, wondering if he has what it takes to seize this opportunity. The master watches him with a sharp, knowing gaze, sensing the shift in the young man's resolve. Their blades meet again in a flash of red energy, the duel growing more intense with every passing moment, and a smirk plays on the master's lips as he guides the boy's movements and thoughts through the fight. Anho spins, unleashing a powerful circular strike, contemplating his next move in the heat of battle. He wonders what a legendary grandmaster would do in this situation, channeling his ideals into his swordsmanship. For a split second, the Supreme Master's expression shows a hint of surprise at the boy's unexpected technique. The clash of their blades creates a blinding red light, reflecting in the Master's focused eyes. The young disciple sees the Master's form reflected in his own eye, analyzing every subtle movement. In a swift motion, his sword is sent flying from his grasp, tumbling through the air of the dreamscape. The master stands perfectly still, watching calmly as the disarmed blade flies past his shoulder. The sword lands perfectly upright in the ground, and the master gives a slight nod, admitting it was not bad. Ho stares at his hand in shock, wondering what that incredible power he just felt was. The master calmly explains it was the Natma sword technique, adding that he purposely slowed it down for him. The young disciple is skeptical, thinking the difference in power was as vast as that between a worm and a dragon, and seeing his disbelief, the master insists it is the same technique and asks him how that could be possible. He then smiles, saying that explaining it directly would not be fun and would hinder his development. Instead, the legendary figure decides to give the young disciple a homework assignment. His task is to figure out for himself why the technique he witnessed is still the Natma sword. He promises a great reward if Anho succeeds, which catches the young man completely off guard. As Anho tries to ask about the reward, the dream begins to fade and he feels himself being pulled away, and the master's final words remind him of his breakfast duty, showing a connection to his real life. As the vision ends, the master muses that after 100 years, Manhwa has finally become interesting again. Anho is snapped back to reality by a loud voice, as another disciple complains he is not portioning the side dishes properly. Still dazed from the dream, Anho looks up from his breakfast duty, a ladle in his hand, and the disciple demands more food, but Anho calmly explains that the meal portions are fixed for everyone. A flicker of annoyance crosses his face as he wonders why even a mid-level disciple is trying to push him around. He tightens his grip on the ladle, frustrated that he is being bullied by someone so insignificant. With a dark smile, he tells the disciple to stop bothering people and just leave, hinting that he will eat less otherwise. And the other disciple is stunned by his sudden confidence, as who implies that the top delinquent of Mount Hua is someone else. Just then, Jang Kwang storms over, furious about having to wait in line to be served by someone like Anho, and the other disciple stammers nervously, trying to explain the situation to Kwang, who demands to know what is going on. Intimidated, the other disciple quickly apologizes and scurries away with his food tray. As he leaves, he shoots Anho a glare and warns him to watch his back from now on. Ho smirks to himself, knowing there are 173rd generation disciples in the sect, and with so many people around and not much else going on, rumors and conflicts are bound to spread quickly. Later, a sect leader gathers the disciples for a practical application of their lecture content. Anho recalls that this sect leader's lectures were always his favorite for their focus on real battle experience. During the practical session, he is paired with the same disciple from breakfast, who warns him again to watch his back. The young man remains calm, having expected this confrontation, and feels surprisingly unafraid. With newfound confidence, his eyes narrow as he prepares himself for the impending duel. His opponent, however, sees only the weakling he has always known, completely unaware of the master's shadow looming behind him. After experiencing the grandmaster's swordplay in his dreams, Anho's perception of martial arts has completely changed. The other disciple is enraged, furious that someone he considers a weak loser would dare to stand up to him. He remembers Anho as someone who got into the sect by luck, unlike the others who were chosen for their skills. Vowing to put the weakest loser in his place, he grips his wooden sword tightly, his face contorted with rage. Ho, however, stands ready, his demeanor calm and his wooden sword glowing with a faint red aura, and so his eyes gleam with a new light, reflecting the intensity of the training he has undergone in his dreams. That the two disciples face each other on the training grounds, the lush mountains of Mount Hua in the background, and his opponent, marked with a scar on his face, glares at him with contempt, ready to begin the fight. He mockingly asks if Anho is relying on Jang Kwang for protection, a smug grin spreading across his face, and he then taunts him further, saying he is just a stepping stone for Kwang and should just beg for forgiveness now. Anho smirks back, questioning if his opponent has done anything significant enough to deserve being begged for forgiveness. The other disciple grits his teeth in pure rage, seething Anho's name under his breath. Nearby, one of the instructors notices the fight escalating and looks like he is about to step in. However, the older sect leader places a hand on his shoulder, telling him to just leave them be for now. He explains that it is better to let them vent their emotions in an official setting, where they can intervene if needed. The disciple is confused and annoyed, wondering why no one is trying to stop the increasingly heated confrontation. Anho is also surprised by the lack of intervention, having expected the normally meddlesome instructors to step in. His opponent grins menacingly, assuming the silence means no one will save him, and asks if he is getting scared. but Oh simply smiles, calling the disciple by his name, Yahello, and calmly says he is not afraid. He asks if he looks like he's scared, even wagging his finger, thinking that this situation is actually a good thing. He continues to taunt Yahello, saying his head must be for decoration and will be useless if it gets damaged. Completely enraged by the insult, Yahello lunges forward with a furious yell, charging straight at him. Ho calmly analyzes the attack, noting that while his opponent is formidable in size, his sword style is not impossible to handle. He compares this wild display of power to the mysterious techniques of the master from his dreams, seeing his opponent as just a beast. With a sharp focus, his eyes track every detail of the incoming charge, looking for an opening. He sees the reflection of the reckless attack in his eye, identifying the flaws in the brute force approach. He knows that sophisticated techniques often cannot overcome raw power that is as massive as a mountain. But he decides to test his theory, meeting the charge with a precise strike that shatters his opponent's wooden sword, and Yahello grunts in shock and pain as the force of the blow sends splinters flying from his broken weapon. Ho realizes that not all attacks need to be powerful, as his opponent is now reeling from the impact of many weaker strikes, and so he now understands that every attack has a beginning and an end, and exploiting the transitions is the key to victory. He swiftly blocks another strike, the impact rattling his opponent's weapon and sending a shockwave through his arms, and so this allows him to control the flow of the fight, turning his opponent's aggression against him with precise counters. Yahello's eyes widen in disbelief, his rage momentarily replaced by pure shock at his opponent's skill. He grips his wooden sword tighter, his knuckles turning white as he struggles to regain control of the duel. With a furious scream, he unleashes a powerful burst of energy, channeling all his remaining strength into a desperate attack. Ho is surprised to see that his opponent has actually become more powerful, fueled by his rage, but a confident smirk appears on his face as he realizes something crucial about his opponent's state of mind, and he understands that his opponent's excitement and rage are making his movements more predictable and easier to read. With a flash of purple light, he lands another precise strike on Yahello's shoulder, throwing him off balance. He follows up with another quick jab to the other shoulder, continuing to exploit the openings in his defense. A final, powerful blow to his opponent's hand sends a jolt of pain through his arm, weakening his grip. Yahello grunts in pain, the accumulated damage from the precise strikes finally taking its toll. Ho knows his plan is working, his opponent's internal energy can no longer shield him from these effective hits. Seizing the opportunity, he lunges forward, knowing that now is the perfect time to end the fight. Yahello can only watch in shock, his body too slow to react to the final, decisive attack. And so the sect leader observing the fight steps forward, his expression calm as he declares that the conclusion has already been reached. Ho's eyes are wide with focus, his senses completely attuned to the flow of the battle. His gaze is sharp and unwavering, his mind clear as he prepares to deliver the finishing blow. In a swift, decisive motion, the sect leader catches the wooden sword just inches from Yahello's face, ending the duel. Ho snaps back to reality, realizing he almost attacked the sect leader in the heat of the moment. He quickly bows his head and accepts the outcome of the duel with a sheepish smile, and the other disciples are stunned, whispering among themselves about how Ho completely dominated the fight. However, some are still skeptical, pointing out that the fight was one-sided and most of the blows were not that powerful. Kang Ah-hyun watches from the crowd with a thoughtful expression, finding the entire situation somewhat interesting. The sect leader approaches Ho, his expression serious as he asks where he learned those techniques. The young man is taken aback by the direct question, unsure of how to answer without revealing his secret. He knows that telling the truth about being taught by a legendary master in a dream would be unbelievable. After a moment of hesitation, a single drop of sweat rolls down his face as he formulates a plausible lie, and he scratches the back of his head and claims with a smile that he came up with the techniques himself while practicing. The sect leader is shocked by this answer and places a hand on the boy's head, as if to check for a fever. Ho insists it is true, explaining that his lack of talent forces him to devise various strategies to keep up. The elder examines his student, his grip firm as he assesses the boy's physical condition. He notes that Ho is small and probably did not get proper nutrition as a child. His thin and light body is not ideal for supporting powerful internal energy, a crucial element in martial arts. The sect leader realizes the boy must have developed these techniques to compensate for his physical deficiencies. He accepts the explanation, acknowledging that necessity is often the mother of invention. He then reminds Who that the root of all martial arts is internal energy, and he should not neglect the fundamentals. Back in his dream, Uno laughs maniacally, his mind still processing the events of the day. The master finds the story of power before the sword amusing, especially coming from a place like Manhwa. The master's eyes narrow, his expression unreadable as he studies the young disciple before him. He tells Ho to draw his sword, tired of the idle chatter and ready to begin the night's training. And the supreme master's sword glows with an intense blue aura as he reminds the boy that he is not here just to talk. The young disciple stands in stunned silence, the weight of the master's words sinking in. Suddenly, the master leaps into the air, his white cloak billowing behind him as he prepares to attack. Ho panics for a moment, asking him to wait and trying to clarify the terms of their training. He asks if the master could give him a magic formula or a holy elixir instead of just fighting again, and so the legendary figure finds this amusing, explaining that he is already giving him a magic formula through their training. Ho listens intently, a spark of realization in his eyes as he begins to understand the master's true lesson. He knows that he is learning combat skills quickly, but there are other areas where he is still lacking. He cannot improve his physique, stamina, or Q through these dream battles alone. Developing QI is a long and arduous process, often taking up to 10 years of harsh training to even become noticeable. He feels a surge of desperation, the sweat beading on his forehead as he thinks about his limitations. The thought of an elixir crosses his mind, a potential shortcut to the power he so desperately needs. He knows it would not put him on the same level as a prodigy, but it might be enough to secure his place in the sect. The master scolds him for this line of thinking, asking if he has lost his mind and lacks common sense. Ho can only offer a sheepish smile, realizing how foolish his request must have sounded. The supreme master then asks if he has finished the homework he assigned, shifting the topic back to his training. The young man is at a loss for words, unable to provide an answer to the difficult question. Without waiting for a response, the master simply tells him to wield his sword, and the intense training resumes. And despite the grueling nature of the training, Ho finds himself grinning, truly enjoying the thrill of the fight. He realizes that the mundane stamina and discipline training of the real world is boring compared to this. In a split second, the master sees an opening in the boy's defense, a small gap in his stance. But before he can exploit it, Ho's sword is at his throat, ending the dream battle with a playful smile. The next day, the sun shines brightly over the training grounds of the Manhwa sect. Ho reflects on the previous night's dream, wondering how he could ever hope to defeat the legendary master. A loud voice snaps him out of his thoughts, questioning if he has gone crazy. It is Jiang Kuang, who mockingly asks if he is proud of beating Jie Chil the day before, and the young disciple's mind drifts back to his dream, ignoring the bully in front of him. And so, he wonders if continuing his training with the master will allow him to eventually break through Kuang's defense. Jiang Kuang notices he is not paying attention and grows angry, accusing him of thinking about something else. He raises his hand to strike, yelling that who needs to learn to respect those who are stronger than him. But his hand is stopped in mid-air as a calm voice asks if he is talking about something important. It is Kang Ahayan, her expression unreadable as she stands before them, her presence demanding attention. And Jiang Kuang's aggressive demeanor vanishes, and he quickly claims they were just chatting, not talking about anything important. Ho smirks, whispering to Kuang that at their age, bullying is not the same as chatting. He points out that all the male disciples are attracted to Ahayan, which explains Kuang's sudden change in behavior. Hayan smiles and says she will take Ho with her, much to the shock and confusion of both boys. She then scolds Kuang for calling Ho a brat and demands he apologize, which he does with a forced smile. She then turns to Ho and asks if he has time to talk for a while, and he nervously agrees. Hayan gently takes Ho by the wrist, her touch firm but not forceful. She says let's go, pulling him away from the stunned onlookers, much to his surprise. Li Junhang watches them leave from a distance, his face contorted in a silent snarl of jealousy and rage. The girl leads Ho through a forest path, their steps light as they move away from the training grounds. She suddenly stops and apologizes, her foot tapping the ground with a bit of impatience. And so, she explains that she was in a hurry because she had been looking for him all day yesterday. Ho blushes slightly, admitting that he had a little trouble the previous day. And so the young woman then reminds him of the time she interrupted him while he was fighting Jiang Kuang, whom she calls a bore. She explains that despite his appearance, Kuang is the disciple of a great and powerful elder in the sect. She tells him that the boar is a more difficult opponent than the one he fought yesterday, which makes Ho question his own abilities. He knows that Elder Jin Mok is one of the strongest people in the sect, and the gap between him and Kuang is gigantic. Hayan dismisses his concerns, saying that even with his qualifications, a boar is still just a boar. She then notices his improved form, pointing out that he has clearly been practicing diligently. And so the young woman reveals that her parents are from different sects, one from the Sword sect and the other from the Q sect. She complains that the Manhwa sect is too intolerant, which is why she has to keep her background a secret. Ho is confused by her words, asking who the Q and Sword sects are, feigning ignorance, and so, she reveals that the sword techniques he used the day before are from the Sword sect. To prove her point, she demonstrates a few moves, her hands glowing with a bright blue energy. Ho is stunned into silence, realizing that the techniques he learned in his dream are from this mysterious Sword sect. She asks if he truly mastered them without knowing their origin, her eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and admiration. Hayan praises him, noting that the smoothness of his movement suggests he has been practicing for a long time. Eunho's mind flashes back to his dream, wondering if all the things the master showed him were sword techniques. He realizes the fundamental difference between the two styles. One is based on repetition and accuracy, the other on ki and practice, and a spark of understanding ignites in his eyes as he finally grasps the solution to the master's homework. And so the young woman is surprised that he really practiced without knowing the origin of the techniques. And so, he tries to explain that he was never taught by anyone, but he knows she would not believe the truth about his dream. She is completely baffled by his claim, asking if he means to say that he taught himself. Deciding to test his supposed genius, she pulls out a pair of chopsticks, her expression playful yet challenging. She unleashes a flurry of attacks with the chopsticks, her movements swift and precise as she challenges him. Eunho's eyes narrow as he realizes what this is, a practical application of the Grand Master's homework. He meets her challenge head-on, their impromptu duel a dance of wood and energy in the bamboo forest, and his mind races as he formulates the answer to the question that has been bugging him since the dream, and so realizes that the answer to the question lies in the very nature of the techniques he has been learning, and so it is not just about the origin of the moves but the fundamental principles that govern them. He sees the answer clearly now, the homework from the Grandmaster finally making perfect sense, and his eyes are sharp with focus as he prepares to reveal the solution he has discovered. He explains that the basic concepts of the Napma sword are enough for a fight, as long as they are applied correctly. Ah-Hyen is stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief as she realizes he has seen through her test. In a final swift motion, she sends one of the chopsticks flying, which lands perfectly at his feet, and she warns him that the next time they meet, she will make him admit the truth about his training, no matter what it takes. And so he tries to call out to her as she leaps away, watching the red chopsticks fly through the air. He sighs, realizing he wants to ask her more about the sword Sect techniques, but she is already gone. Ah-Hyen's movements are swift and powerful, leaving a trail of orange energy and flower petals in her wake. Eunho is left blushing, the faint scent of blossoms lingering in the air as he watches her disappear. Elsewhere, Lee Junhang asks Jang Kwang about the timing of the next internal tournament. Kwang calculates that it should be within a month, which means they need to deal with Eunho before then. He questions Jun Hang's sudden interest in the weakling, wondering if it is because of his recent upgrade in strength. But the silver-haired youth simply smiles, telling Kwang that he will be the one to deal with him. That night, Eunho finds himself back in the dreamscape, having fallen asleep and returned to his training, and so he has grown used to these nightly sessions, and he approaches the master with a question on his mind. With a hopeful smile, he asks the legendary figure if he thinks he has any talent with the sword. The master is left speechless for a moment, unsure of how to answer such a direct and unexpected question. He tells the boy that if he continues to train, he will eventually be able to become a teenage master. The young disciple is shocked, his mind reeling as he tries to process the weight of those words. He asks for clarification, wondering if the master means he could become a teenage master in the entire Murim. The legendary figure confirms it, explaining that training with the best in the world will naturally lead to such a result. The young man is still a bit hesitant, but the logic behind the master's words is undeniable. He begins to wonder if he is a genius, and the master's laughter seems to confirm his newfound confidence. And so, the legendary figure then reminds him that if he were not talented, he would not have been able to pass the first trial. And so, he then tells him to forget about the homework and pick up his sword, ready to begin another night of intense training. The master then reminds him of his upcoming rematch with Ah-Hyen, which catches him by surprise. He explains that his victory was due to his instinctive fighting ability, but it would be a different story if she had a sword. The young disciple gulps, the thought of facing the prodigy with a real weapon sending a shiver down his spine. He realizes he only has 3 days to practice and wonders if he can truly defeat her in such a short time. A confident smirk spreads across the master's face, a silent challenge in his eyes. When asked if he can win, the legendary figure simply says he does not know, leaving the outcome uncertain. He then tells the boy to stop the useless chatter, as they need to focus on improving his sword skills. The next day, Jang Kwang gathers the other disciples, his voice booming across the training grounds. He points a finger at Eunho, publicly challenging him to a fight in front of everyone. The young disciple is taken aback by the sudden challenge, pointing a finger at himself in confusion. Jang Kwang mocks him, asking if he is afraid and promising to show him what real power looks like. Eunho politely refuses the challenge, which only serves to enrage the bully even more, and so he reminds the young disciple of all the times he has beaten him in the past, trying to intimidate him. But Eunho remains calm, knowing that while he can refuse challenges, it is a different story when there is a crowd. He begins to doubt himself, wondering if the whole talent thing was just a lie from the master. The memories of his past humiliations flash before his eyes, reminding him that he is still the underdog. But he knows the answer is simple, he cannot back down from this public challenge, and he smirks at Jang Kwang, calling him a bore and questioning if he really thought he would just bow down and accept. The bully is stunned by the insult, his face a mixture of shock and rage as the other disciples snicker. Eunho continues to taunt him, saying he is not crazy and is simply talking about common sense and rationality. Jang Kwang stomps his foot in rage, the ground cracking under the force of his anger. He raises his hand to strike, his face a mask of pure fury as he towers over the smaller disciple. Eunho draws his sword, explaining that a boar's brain probably cannot understand their language. He readies his stance, his sword glowing with a bright light as he prepares to fight. Jang Kwang is taken aback by the sudden display of power, his attack momentarily forgotten. The young disciple's eyes are sharp with focus, his mind already calculating his first move. He sees a gap in the bully's defense and lunges forward, his fist connecting with a solid thud. But he knows that a single hit is not enough to cause any real damage, given the vast difference in their strength. He realizes that he should not keep fighting and considers using his sword to even the odds. And suddenly, another disciple calls out their names, interrupting the tense standoff. Eunho looks over, a mischievous glint in his eye as he sees a way out of this confrontation. The scene shifts to a peaceful bamboo forest, a rainbow arcing across the bright blue sky. And so he tells Ah Hyen that he will have to deal with Jang Kwang, a fact that seems to amuse her. She reminds him of their promise, her tone playful but with an underlying seriousness. He tries to postpone their duel, arguing that he was the one who made the promise in the first place. The young woman pauses for a moment, a thoughtful expression on her face as she considers his words, and she admits that he has a point, surprised that he is harder to gaslight than she thought. He laughs, teasingly asking if people just agree with her because she is pretty, and she blushes at the compliment, a hand flying to her mouth to hide her smile. With a confident smile, she asks if he really thinks she is pretty, her eyes sparkling with amusement. Who scratches the back of his head with a charming smile, admitting that it is true she is pretty. The young woman's face turns beet red, and she yells at him to shut up, clearly flustered by the direct compliment, and she quickly tells him to take care, reminding him that it will be her turn after he beats Jang Kwang, then leaps away. He waves goodbye with a smile, thinking to himself that she always smells incredibly good. As she runs off, her long purple hair flows gracefully behind her, leaving a trail of flower petals in her wake.